Welcome everybody, I'm Dorothy-holder of dorothy-holder.com. Today we're looking at Haunted Episode 4, Influences Beyond the Grave. The Dybbuk-box is today's subject and topic, and it's a really interesting situation as the history that's written or, shareable, whichever way you want to go, is fairly recent, although the box itself isn't. There is a little bit of unsubstantiated stuff that suggests it was made in Germany during the war, but who knows. What I do know is that the lady who passed it on was 103 years old. So we'll start at the very beginning, I guess, and we'll have a look at the Dybbuk-box. But firstly, it's probably worthwhile understanding what the Dybbuk, and it's never Dybbuk, it's the Dybbuk means. In Russian, it translates to between two worlds. In Poland, it represents haunting, and when used in Yiddish, the word it represents malicious possession by a dislocated dead person. Aspects of Judaism and pretty much all religions have their mystery side, If you just look at the Kabbalah, if you have a look at the demonology aspect of religion, you can see that in visionaries and prophets. So there's always this mystery side in pretty much any religion. And through time immemorial, that ordinary folks have been scared by those speaking from pulpits on the wrath of God, demons, and possession. Why is it then that when a perfectly reasonable person relates bizarre experiences, or many people relate similar experiences in a localized setting, that all of a sudden the individual sharing their story is branded unreliable or kooky or whatever? In fact, noticeably, in the 16th century, the Dybbuk came about. That's in written acknowledgement of the words the Dybbuk and what they represent comes from the 16th century. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a strong oral tradition prior to that, or that there weren't writings that were lost or it wasn't removed from. Let's face the fact here, we have had agendized modifications of certain texts to suit a group's belief system. So that notwithstanding, we do know that the actual term comes from the 16th century Judaism, nothing else, and yet some modern-day rabbis will refer to it as a kind of a kook or a kooky thing, which suggests that they've come so far in their own mind to something different, that where the Judaism incorporated this mystic side, they've decided in their infinite wisdom that must mean that they were just superstitious, whereas today, for whatever reason, it's okay and it's acceptable to think about angels and to have that written into the Torah and to have that written into Bibles. But as soon as we're looking at a slightly darker reality there, it's suddenly a kooky thing. So I would suggest to anybody that if it's going to be kooky, for it to be a little bit dark or a little bit challenging or even uncomfortable, then it has to be kooky to look at it in any other way, shape or form. Either that's more palatable, pleasant, and not necessarily more reasonable though. So why is it then that this happens? It's quite an interesting thing. It's no secret that for thousands of years, exorcism has been practiced in various ways by various religions, as well as shamanic belief systems, religious and shamanic belief systems. So we need to acknowledge then that the word possession has a foundational belief that comes from thousands of years ago. Is there really any logic to believing in God and angels, who did apparently engage in a fair bit of mind-bending stuff, presenting themselves as visions, giving instructions and orders, and smiting those who did not obey, and then refusing to believe that any other experience of otherworldly beings simply cannot be? Perhaps it's belief itself that determines whether this is a godlike, less than benign interference in life choices or a haunting of the departed. There are some genuinely interesting questions there for me anyway. If we really want to go there, the question is raised on any form of life after death. Is it sold? It is sold quite literally as a means to maintain the financial institution of religious orders. And that is all of them. Without question, they all offer a life after death if you come our way, if you do it our way, if you do what we suggest, if you follow our mandates, our dogmas, if you follow our rules, then you will find yourself in a position of being able to attain this life after death. If we go back to the early, like the the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you find a very interesting take on that, which means, that essentially you become a non-person, you become a non-personality, a non-character, if you have ascended correctly. You are not a kind of a being that's human-like in a better and a bigger form. Quite interesting, really. Good stuff. I did do those shows, Keepers of the Light. If you want to come through to www.intuitalks.com or go through to www.energy-therapies.intuitalks.com, you'll be able to go to my show page and have a look at the recordings of Keepers of the Light, where these very ancient orders have shared their knowledge to such an extent that we now call that, New Age or modern spirituality, because we've just taken, really we've bastardized a lot of learning by just taking what we're comfortable with and then twisting that to suit our modern idea of what it should be. I don't know that we've done better by calling ourselves spiritualists than any religion has ever done, because anything that has a group affiliation of sorts and has its standards is really a religion of sorts. So there's a mandate, there's a code of behavior, there's a thing you should or shouldn't do. There's an interpretation of that. There's a belief that follows through with that. And as soon as you've got a belief and there's a collective belief, you have something that is more like a religion than you might be comfortable thinking. But, if you're going to sell a life, if we're looking at that, selling life after death and promises of such as normal, then surely how you experience that life after death is subjective. Assumptions or delusions of grandeur and being delivered to some pearly gates, floating on the clouds, beatifically living a non-life, looking down upon us mere mortals after, of course, they've been a mere mortal, or a life of eternal bliss, where apparently nothing can happen that's negative, or perhaps to find yourself in an eternal battle with your ego, are equally offering a suggestion that life after death is, in fact, an unknown. By having so many serious, spiritual, foundational belief systems offering different, not realities really, because they're not reality, but different styles of post-life living, suggests that there is a quantum of belief of an individual or a group of individuals at the base of all of it. This is what we believe happens. Now, they can believe that happens based on any amount of experience, and that's where the Tibetan Book of the Dead's got a big calling to me. It's not really religious as such. It determines that after you have died, there is a period of time where you get to still make choices, but it's only a period of time. It isn't thousands of years. Okay, so there's this period of time that lasts for, a matter of weeks, where you can make a decision as to whether you become one with the gods, or if you can't really go there, if you can't really relinquish your attachment to reality, to the planet, to living, to life, to material things, if you like. Living is a material thing, just so as we're clear on that. Your body is a material being, is material. Your experience of walking, driving, your experience of looking out on the beautiful sky is a material thing. All of these are material things. So if you can't release that attachment, the very final option left open to you is no option at all. That is the option of rebirth. That is the option of reincarnation. And so we've taken this as spirituality in a modern way and determined that, this is something we do. We do it to gain experience. Yet the earliest writings about reincarnation all suggest that actually it's like a failed option. And the more you fail in that option, the less likely you are to return in a decent body. That is, as a human, I guess, is supposed to be the best. And then again, immediately when you say being a human is the pinnacle of life experience, you are really suggesting that you're not one with everything, because why not a tree? What is wrong with being a tree? What is wrong with being a totally giving, breathing, organic structure that's at one with the earth, at one with the air? Why does it have to be human? What consciousness lies within those other things that makes them lesser than humans to start with? So there's a basic flaw in just about any post-life offering, but it's all very good questions. And that just reminds me, on Ghost Call Radio next Monday, 5 p.m, I'm going to be doing past life readings, and we're going to talk a bit more in depth about that, because I have a lot to say. But we're back to being haunted now, and we're back to the dybbuk-box. There is even a possibility for hauntings. If we're going to talk about and believe in, which is where this paragraph started going and ended up going off track a little bit, is that if you're going to believe in any kind of afterlife, regardless of what it is, then you must allow for the possibility of a haunting. You must allow for the ability of something without a physical manifestation, to be able to manifest some change, some influence on energy in the world we are living in. Now, there are people who will never feel it, and there are people who will feel it. But the question isn't about life after death, really. The question is, if you believe in life after death in any of its forms, if you believe in that on a religious level or on a spiritual level or on a shamanic level, it doesn't matter which one, then you really must embrace the potential of haunting. You just must. And you can't necessarily say, well, if it's going to happen, it's all going to be good. If, most people, religious or not, spiritual or not, have a belief that their loved ones are nearby, or have a belief. I've lost count of how many people have come to me after a loss of a loved one, and actually they're not saying, are they there? They're saying, are they okay? And it's so ingrained in our belief systems that the first thought isn't, have they gone forever, but are they okay? That means that there is an intrinsic willingness, at least, to believe that they are actually in place. Now, we don't honestly know that our beloved sister, brother, parent, whatever, grandparent isn't running around causing havoc for somebody. We honestly don't know that. We only know what our experience is. And so if we can be open to possibilities, then things like haunted and things like curses and things like these boxes and these items and these jewelry items that have these ideas like the Hope Diamond that have some serious tragedy around them, or definitely interesting, at least, occurrences, become something of a less comfortable nature. And I think it's an easy shift away from, the discomfort of thinking that an object has the potential to hold enough energy to influence your own or someone else's life. I mean, that's a horror story by itself. You don't need a movie for that, although Hollywood did make a movie based on the Dybbuk-box, so I will bring that up. And that movie was called The Possession, and it is definitely based on this the Dybbuk-box. And of course, you will notice if you go and watch that movie, if you're into that kind of horror flick or whatever, there's Kira Sedgwick. She's in this picture just to prove that it happened that way, with Jason, what's his name, Jason Hexton, who is the current and was the last owner of the box. So just so as we know, and he's still alive and kicking. But yes, so that's him with Kira Sedgwick when they had made the movie and put it out there. So there's the word comfort, I suppose, becomes ideal when we decide whether we think something can be haunted or not. Whether it can hold an influence enough to make us sick is a really good question. In this case, make something quite drastic and tragic happen, and something very physical or physiological happen in the real world. And so it's one of those curiosities here. There's such a huge amount of interest around this sort of thing that people will pay a lot of money to own or possess something like this, something that has this kind of thing going on. And then mega more people will determine that just by reading it, looking at it, hearing the story, that their life has been touched in a negative way, that they feel like the spirits have contacted them. Jason actually mentions that he got so many emails and letters from people that wanted to have him take any photos off the internet of the Dybbuk-box, that he just had to set up whole email systems to deal with it, that they were saying, just by it being there, it's bringing horrible spirits into their lives. Now, sometimes it's a want to be noticed, but there's a question in there. So I suppose we also have to acknowledge there's another little bit of stuff here, that if you don't want to be in the same room as something like that, you are already acknowledging that something about it scares you. You're acknowledging that there's enough potential for reality for that for you to want to maintain your distance. Every one of us, let's face it, at some point has had that eerie feeling, right? The hairs standing up on the back of your neck, or you feel that you're not alone, even though you are singularly alone in a space. That somebody's watching you, even though you know that's impossible. Not always happening. This doesn't always happen in the dark, and it doesn't always happen when you're alone. Getting that sudden goosebumps and not knowing, what is that? Somebody walked over your grave. That's such a term, somebody walked over your grave. Where does that term come from? And it comes from the fact that it's such a chilling feeling. It's not a feeling that feels good, in other words. It's not one of those feelings where you just sigh it out and think, that's lovely. So we call it something quite defiant. Somebody walks over your grave. Sounds like about the worst thing that could happen to you, right? When you're alone, you just know that there's, in these situations, in these moments, you just know there's some underlying energy or a person or an entity or something that you are only partially aware of. And that in itself has a kind of sneaky, freaky feeling to it. But with the Dybbuk box, the tale began in the fall of 2001. And this is the tale as to from the written acknowledgement of this. This is when it becomes out there. Now, this man, he was an Oregon antiques collector, a small business owner. His name, Kevin Mannis. He discovered the box, literally discovered the box, smaller than a case of beer, decorated with 2 metal plates. Oops, I'll get that picture up and running. Here we go. Here's the Dybbuk box. That's what it looks like. If you want to get a look at that, just pop along to www.intuitalks.com. And check out the shows. You can look at the show calendar too to find older shows, etc. And you can go and obviously check out Energy Therapies to see all of the shows that I've put through Intuitalks. They all have images with them if you want to look at those things. When he found it, the 2 metal plates, the shape of grape clusters, at a neighbourhood estate sale. Mannis later told the LA Times that he bought the box actually in 2000, but so much bad fortune befell him in that first year that he didn't want to tell potential buyers about it. Now, there's an interesting thing in there because he had determined not to sell it early on. He changed what he was going to do with it. So there's a little change in some of the stories here. Mannis said that the estate sales host told him that the box had belonged to her 103-year-old grandmother, who had dubbed the cabinet a Dybbuk box and warned her kids never to open it. Now, he didn't know what a Dybbuk box was at the time, by the way. And as I said, it's a Yiddish word, so I wouldn't have known either. So there's this interesting thing. Because she had been warned by the grandmother never to open it, and all the kids had. He, being the man and being who he is, he just thought that's what adults say to children when they don't want them to go into their private stuff, right? And especially as it is technically a wine cabinet, so there's wine inside that, or should be wine kept in that. So it's a very logical thing to try and scare the kids off a little bit, because we all lived with that, didn't we? Heedless of this, Mannis bought the box and put it in the basement of his antiques business. The reason he did that, by the way, was he was going to tidy it up before he put it out for sale or anything, before doing anything with them. But a half an hour after the box arrived, the creepiness, as he describes it himself, began. And while Mannis ran a few errands, a mysterious force apparently went berserk in his shop, cursing and smashing light bulbs. Now, in Mannis's own words, in his advert on eBay to sell this box, by the way, he put $1 reserve on it. So he wasn't sort of saying, I want lots of money. He was really trying to just get it gone. He said of his clerk, his store clerk was scared. She was absolutely hysterical and screaming that she rang him on his cell phone. This is 2001, remember? 2001, remember? She was absolutely hysterical and screaming that someone was in my workshop breaking glass and swearing. Furthermore, the intruder had locked the iron security gates and the emergency exit, and she couldn't get out. As I told her to call the police, my cell phone battery went dead. I hit speeds of 100 miles per hour getting back to the shop. When I arrived, I found the gates locked. I went inside and found my employee on the floor in a corner of my office, sobbing hysterically. I ran to the basement and went downstairs. At the bottom of the stairs, I was hit by an overpowering and unmistakable odor of cat urine, and it's to be noted there has never been any animals kept or found in my shop, and I have never had a cat. The lights didn't work. As I investigated, I found that the reason the lights didn't work also explained the sounds of glass breaking. All of the light bulbs in the basement were broken. All 9 incandescent bulbs had been broken in their sockets, and 10 4-foot fluorescent tubes were lying shattered on the floor. I did not find an intruder, however. I should also add that there was only one entrance to the basement. It would have been impossible for anyone to leave without meeting me head-on. I went back up to speak to my salesperson, but she had already left. Now, I'm going to interject here and say that at the beginning, too, he says because the emergency exit and all these gates were locked, his staff person couldn't leave, even though she was trying. So that kind of makes it logical that if he had to use a key to get in, that no other intruder would be able to get out either. Just a thought. She never returned to work ever, even though she had worked with me for 2 years. She refuses to discuss the incident to this day. I never thought of relating the events of that day to anything having to do with the cabinet. In other words, in his mind, somebody still had got in there and maliciously broken all of his lights and somehow managed to get out. But things did get worse, again in Manus's words. As I already indicated, I had decided to give the cabinet to my mother as a birthday gift. About 2 weeks after I made the purchase, I decided to get started refurbishing it. I was surprised to find that the cabinet has a unique little mechanism. When you open one of the doors, the mechanism causes the opposite door and the little drawer below to open at the same time. It is very well made. Inside the cabinet, I found the following items: one 1928 US wheat penny, one 1925 US wheat penny, one small lock of blonde hair bound with string, one small lock of black-brown hair bound with string, one small granite statue engraved and gilded with Hebrew letters. I've been told that the letters spell out the word shalom, one dried rosebud, one golden wine cup, one very strange black cast-iron candlestick holder with octopus legs. So that's pretty much the close-up of what's in there. I can't quite see. Yep, that's the gold chalice and that's the black candlestick holder and the shalom. I saved all of the items in the box, intending to return them to the estate. The family has refused the items, so they will be included in the sale of this cabinet. After opening the cabinet, I decided not to refinish it. I cleaned it and rubbed it in some lemon oil. It was at this time that I noticed that there was an inscription on Hebrew carved into the back of the cabinet. I have no idea what it says or even if it's significant. I've included a picture of that inscription. On his birthday, she called to tell me that she was going out of town with my sister for 3 days, and we postponed celebrating that day together until she returned. When she returned, she came to my shop. We were going to have lunch together, but before we were going to leave, I gave her the wine cabinet. She seemed to like it. While she examined it, I went to make a phone call. I hadn't been out of sight more than 5 minutes when one of my employees came running into my office saying that something was going wrong with my mum. When I went back to see what the matter was, I found my mum sitting in a chair beside the cabinet. Her face had no expression, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. No matter how I tried to get her to respond, she would not. She could not. It turns out that my mother had suffered a stroke. She was taken to the hospital by ambulance, where she ended up suffering partial paralysis and losing her ability to speak. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, one moment there. Losing her ability to speak. She couldn't form words, and although she has since regained that ability, she could understand things being said to her at the time and could respond by pointing to letters of the alphabet to spell out words she wanted to say. When I asked her the following day how she was doing, she teared up and spelled out the words, "No gift." I assured her that I had given her a gift for her birthday, thinking that she didn't remember, but she became even more upset and spelled out the words, "Hate gift." I laughed and told her not to worry. I told her I was sorry she didn't like the cabinet and that I would get her anything she wanted if she would promise to get well soon. Still, I didn't associate anything that had happened with the cabinet itself or anything paranormal. Frankly, I don't think I even used the term paranormal until this last month. I gave the cabinet to my sister. She kept it for a week, then gave it back. She complained that she couldn't get the doors to stay closed and that they kept coming open. There are no springs in the door mechanism, and I have never found that the doors come open. In other words, you had to open one door for the spring of the other two to work. My brother said it smelled, so he gave it to his brother and his wife, who kept it for 3 days and gave it back. Now we're starting to see a pattern, right? These people are taking it, they're getting it for a couple of days, and they're going, yeah, nah, take it back. My brother said it smelled like jasmine flowers, while his wife insisted that it put an odor of cat urine. I gave it to my girlfriend, who asked me to sell it for her after only 2 days. I sold it the same day to a nice middle-aged couple. 3 days later, when I came to open the shop for the day, I found the cabinet sitting in the front doors with a note that read, This has a bad darkness. I had no idea what that meant. Anyway, I ended up taking it home. Since the day I brought it home, I began having a strange recurring nightmare. Now, bearing in mind all this time, it's been in Mr. Manus' shop, not in his personal space. Now, he's already had this one incident in his shop. He keeps trying to give it away. It keeps coming back like a bad penny. So I find myself waking with every time once he got it home, he started having this recurring nightmare. And every time I have the horrible dream, it goes something like this. I find myself walking with a friend, usually someone I know well and trust, and at some point in the dream, I find myself looking into the eyes of that person that I'm with. It is then that I realize that there's something different, something evil looking back at me. At that point in my dream, the person I am with changes into what can only be described as the most gruesome, demonic-looking hag that I have ever seen. The hag proceeds then to beat the living tar out of me. I have awakened numerous times to find bruises and marks on myself where I'd been hit by the old woman during the previous night. Still, I never related the nightmares to the cabinet, nor do I think that I ever would have. But about a month ago, my sister and my brother and his wife came over to the house, and they spent the night. The following morning during breakfast, my sister complained that she had a horrible nightmare. She said that she recalled having had it a couple of times before, and went on to describe my nightmare exactly to the last detail. My brother and his wife froze as they listened, and then chimed in that they had both had the exact same dreams during the night as well. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck, and it still is. As we talked, it became clear that the common denominator was that each of us had had the nightmare during the times that the cabinet was in our respective homes. I called my girlfriend and asked if she recalled having any nightmares recently. She described the same nightmare, the same hag, everything. And when I asked her if she remembered the date when she had the nightmare, she said she did not until I asked if it happened to be the night before she gave me the cabinet back. She said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" Eventually, the cabinet fell into the hands of Jason Haxton. This is because it got sold on eBay. And Jason Haxton, he writes, "I woke up the next day after having this cabinet in my home. My eyes looked like someone had gouged me and looked bloody." He said, "I noticed it right away. I didn't think much about it, but after several weeks, there was no change. I started choking, started getting hives and a strange taste I never had in my mouth before." Other ailments included coughing up blood and welts that would appear from head to toe and then disappear. Also, he smelled aromas of cat urine and jasmine flower when he or his family were around the box, the same smells other owners of the box had experienced. When he began experiencing these ailments, Haxton said he thought that the Dybbuk box may have been contaminated. However, tests conducted on the box were negative for any chemical or biohazard contamination. And since he couldn't find any evidence of contamination to the box, Haxton said he began to question if the box had a spiritual attachment to it. He began talking to Jewish rabbis who suggested that the box be placed in a 24-karat gold-lined acacia woodwork, the same materials used to construct the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible. The rabbis said, line it in gold because God loves gold. So we get that, do we? An interesting idea right there. God loves gold. Once the Dybbuk box was placed in the wooden ark, Haxton said he stopped having problems with it and his health improved. So maybe whatever was going on was contained by the gold itself. But ultimately, he claims to have buried the box to ensure that it doesn't fall into the hands of demented seekers who don't care particularly about the ethics of selling it for profit or even the welfare of their friends and family. Quite interestingly, Mr. Haxton himself, Jason himself, clearly wasn't interested in moving along. But in his research, he did come up with that some of the items or the items that were found in the box itself were items that were used in exorcisms. And so there may be that belief then that by using the items for exorcism and keeping them in that box, it's changed the box from now being a wine box to more of a box that may contain energies that attaches to those that were being exorcised or even the suffering of the people that were being exercised. Quite an interesting thing indeed. What we need to be open to and nothing more really is that, obviously if you've got a lot of information about something, your mind can play tricks on you. Obviously if you buy something that is traditional and beautiful, clearly, and you don't want to use it, you've bought it for that purpose, then it becomes a question of why would you go further? It was Jason Haxton who in 2012 responded to questioning by reporters. So that meant that there were a few things going around about the Dybbuk box in LA and in the area at the time. You can find those articles on LA Times. You won't find much. They're quite small, but at the same time, they are there. There were interviews. There was quite a bit going on. But of course, once it became a movie, once it became The Possession, and it was what was behind The Possession, loosely based on, then the interest in it, of course, was arisen. The whole things surrounding the dybbuk box, so for me, comes to the idea that the dybbuk itself has a very long-standing history within Judaism, that with the mysticism and the understanding, because, the Torah itself talks about angels, it talks about entities and visions. There's this mystic idea of the Torah being the word of God to such an extent that it's prophecy, that you can use that Torah in such a way that you can read the future, that you can get clues to life. And there are Jewish scholars that devote their life to the study of these words and how they can actually translate into life. They can describe any person on the planet, any piece of information, which kind of brings us back to that Akashic record idea, or the Carl Jung idea, that everything that's ever happened is held in place, and that we access that continually. We're not really creating anything new. We're not really thinking anything new. We're taking the grains of something that already exists and we're building upon it for sure, developing it maybe, or replicating it in the best way we can. But in actual fact, we are not the originators of any of it. And that in itself is a fascinating thought and a fascinating idea, because that means we can tap into this energy as well. It means we can tap into subtle frequencies. We can tap into information beyond what our conscious mind is prepared to allow us either to believe or process in a way that we understand. I just think this whole area is a fascinating area. I've only once had an experience, so I probably should mention it at some point during this series, but I did have an experience once which really did freak me out a long time before I started any of this. I was in Caboolture in Australia in a house that wasn't old, was fairly modernish, shish. The actual house out the front, I was in the back. The one out the back was like a little, just like a little batch, I suppose. But it was fairly new. There had been no deaths, no dramas, no nothing going on there. When I was sitting there one day and I was writing, this is before computers, I was handwriting a letter, and there was it was just a silly thing really. There was a little box of sparkles, which is not even a box really. It's I don't even know how to say this, but it's a tube of 10 lollies. They're all square, and it's just a silver wrap, their official wrap, and each lolly inside is individually wrapped in plastic, right? So these were these sparkles. Now, here's the first bit here. I don't eat the sparkles. They were already there. We were staying as guests, so they were already in this space. There was a sideboard, and I'm pretty sure, I can't say 100%, I'm pretty sure they're on there, but on this sideboard. What I know for sure, 100%, is that the table I was sitting on, and my daughter was a baby, she was like, maybe 4 months old. She was just a baby. And I know she was asleep while I was writing this letter. And I looked just to my right. I was just right, nothing different, nothing strange, no weird feelings, nothing going on, no sounds. But I looked just to my right at one moment. You know how you think about what you're going to write next. And I was looking at the table, and this little packet of sparkles was there. It seemed so inconsequential that when I looked at it, my whole body went bing. And the reason it did that is I knew that they shouldn't be there. That's it, end of story. They should not be there. Now, in a normal circumstance, one would think, well, maybe they were there and I didn't notice them. And that's, to me, that happens all the time, that sort of stuff. And you don't have any bing from the body. Your mind doesn't go, what the hell? How did that get there? So we do know what is around us, especially, it was just a dining table. It wasn't particularly large. It was pretty easy to spot or not spot things. But they shouldn't have been there. And that, I think, was the thing. And so I spent quite a bit of time thinking, how could they possibly have got from that sideboard to there? And since I didn't eat them, I knew I hadn't mindlessly put them there. But even if I had, my body would have had a memory of that, even if I hadn't got a conscious memory. There's all sorts of things around this stuff, and people can give you a whole pile of maybes and possibilities and stuff, and where's this going, and what does that mean, and this could be this, and that could be that. But when it happens to you, when you do have a little something happen to you, that's that immediate. For example, if it turned up in my bag and I didn't know how it got there, I would put two and two together and determine somebody else had put them there, and I didn't know. That's a completely different thing to this being in front of me in that moment, and I hadn't been out, I hadn't been anywhere, there'd been nobody else there. All of these things come into play. So quite an interesting aspect of what possibly happened there. It leaves an open-ended question. And that's okay. One of the things we need to be able to do is we need to be able to learn to live with mystery, because as soon as we try to give ourselves an answer to something, we are trying to prove a theory, which I mentioned in last week's show of Haunted. When we're trying to prove a theory, we become an unreliable witness. If we've got a belief in, dead people doing stuff like that, or telekinesis even, if you've got a belief that we can do stuff like that, as soon as you've got a set belief, then your brain will do what it's meant to do, is it will provide that belief system as a solution to the conundrum. I'm quite happy to actually look at these and go, this is a possibility, that's a possibility, and it doesn't matter that I can't find an answer for that, because as soon as I narrow down the possibility to my belief, suddenly I might be closing the door to a true or more real, or whatever it might be, more true being probably the better term, answer. And I'm very happy to allow my, if you want to call them belief systems, they're not really set in stone, so they may not be able to be, but my theories, what I understand to date, I'm quite happy to leave them fairly open-ended, and a lot of them have already evolved massively from when I first started my so far into 20-year journey. So there we go. That's something for you to all think about. Next week on Haunted, that's number 5, episode 5, we're going to look at the curse of James Dean's car. Now, there's a bit of stuff around that, and although I've always heard a little bit about it, when you really start looking into it, it gets quite exciting, as terrible as that might sound. And then you wonder whether this is something that was already there with James Dean, or whether, of course, that was something that came after James Dean. Just a thought. His car he called the little bastard, so we can't get away from saying those words during the show, so please bear with me. But in the meantime, you can catch me with past life readings on Ghost Talk Radio on Monday, 5 p.m. EST. We've only got a few more episodes left. We're halfway through that one as well before it finishes. And then, of course, Haunted at Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Intuitalks. So remember this week, everybody, and thank you for coming, by the way. Don't be a part of the problem. No, that's not what I meant to say at all. I meant to say this week, don't be a part of your own problem, and ciao for now.